when my golden boy brother shoved me over the railing of our family yacht. He told the police I had just drunk too much and slipped. My parents, desperate to protect a $2 billion corporate merger, locked me in a hospital room and ordered me to keep my mouth shut. They thought the freezing water of the bay would break my spirit. Instead, it just made me cold enough to destroy them completely. Hello, everyone. Before today's story begins, we'd like to share a quick message. YouTube recently removed our monetization, cutting off our income. If you enjoy this story, we humbly ask for just $1 to help pay our staff so they can make a living and keep creating for you. Thank you for saving us. Now, let's begin the story. My name is Sadie Spencer. I am 28 years old, and I exist as a localized glitch in the flawless programming of my family's empire. Our estate in Greenwich, Connecticut, spans 30 acres, featuring immaculate gardens that require a small army of landscapers to maintain. The house itself is a sprawling neoclassical monstrosity, with marble floors so polished they reflect the hollow emptiness of the people walking on them, while the rest of the Spencer family breathed in the intoxicating fumes of power. I preferred the sterile, predictable world of data. I work as a data analyst at Aethera Biogenics, a private biotechnology research institute. My days are spent buried in algorithms and raw statistics, completely detached from the suffocating, ostentatious lifestyle of my blood relatives. To my parents, Arthur and Eleanor Spencer, public image is not just a priority, it is their absolute religion. They are apex predators in the financial world, running Spencer Apex Capital, a hedge fund so massive it dictates market trends on a whim. Their lives are a meticulously curated exhibition of philanthropic galas, country club dinners, and perfectly rehearsed smiles for the financial press. They measure a person's worth entirely by their net worth and their utility. In their grand tapestry of perfection, a quiet, analytical daughter who prefers oversized sweaters and database architecture to designer gowns and society luncheons is nothing more than a disappointment they actively try to hide. We live under the same massive roof. Yet I have gone weeks without hearing my mother speak a single word to me that was not a sharp critique of my posture. Then there is Julian. My older brother is the undisputed crown prince of the Spencer dynasty, blessed with my mother's piercing blue eyes and my father's ruthless charisma. Julian is the golden boy every elite family prays for. Currently, he is the architect behind an impending corporate merger with a titan of the tech industry, a historic deal valued at over $2 billion. On the surface, he is a charming, articulate visionary, but growing up in his shadow, I always recognized the cruelty hiding beneath his perfectly tailored suits. Julian views people as chess pieces, and he has never minded sacrificing pawns to protect his king. Unlike the typical socialite daughters of our circle, who dabble in art curation or pretend to run vanity nonprofits, I deal with cold, hard facts. Numbers do not lie, and they certainly do not care about a family's reputation. I spend my days building predictive models for genetic research, finding patterns in the chaos of human biology. Because Aethera Biogenics frequently receives venture funding from Spencer Apex Capital, our financial databases occasionally overlap. Late one Tuesday evening, while running a routine cross-check algorithm on our investment influxes to ensure compliance for the upcoming quarter, my screen flagged a massive anomaly. At first, I thought it was a simple coding error, perhaps a misplaced decimal point in the automated ledger, but as my fingers flew across the keyboard, writing custom queries and tracing the digital breadcrumbs, the error blossomed into a financial black hole that threatened to swallow everything. Tens of millions of dollars were simply missing from the family fund. Digging deeper into the highly encrypted ledgers, the horrifying reality began to take shape. Julian was not just embezzling family money. The funds were being systematically broken down into smaller, untraceable amounts and funneled through offshore shell companies. I spent 48 hours straight writing custom decryption scripts to track the final destination. The money was bleeding directly into the hidden accounts of an underground crime syndicate operating out of the East Coast. My brother was washing dirty money to pay off a colossal extortion debt. It took me another 12 hours of hacking into sealed police archives to understand exactly why. 7 years ago, a pedestrian was killed in a brutal hit-and-run on a dark coastal highway. The case was abruptly closed due to a lack of evidence, but the dates of Julian's first massive payout perfectly aligned with the week of the crash. The Golden Boy had killed someone, and he was bleeding our family empire dry to keep the vultures quiet. I could not let it go. The following evening, I cornered Julian in the mahogany-paneled family library. The room smelled of expensive scotch and ancient leather, a fitting arena for a reckoning. "I know about the missing $45 million. Julian," I said, dropping a thick folder of printed data logs directly onto his desk. "I also know exactly who you are paying, and the hit and run you are trying to bury." Julian froze. For a fraction of a second, his charming mask slipped, revealing the monster underneath. Then, he leaned back in his heavy leather chair, swirling the amber liquid in his glass with maddening calm. "Sadie, my sweet, paranoid sister," he chuckled, his voice dripping with condescension. "You have been staring at those computer screens for far too long. You are stressed. You are seeing ghosts in random numbers." "Do not try to gaslight me," I shot back, my voice steady despite the adrenaline pounding in my chest. "The blockchain traces are undeniable. The syndicate has you by the throat, and you are going to drag the entire firm down with you." He stood up slowly, closing the distance between us. The charming smile vanished entirely, replaced by something cold, hollow, and utterly terrifying. He leaned in, his face mere inches from mine. "You really need to take a break. Sadie," he whispered, his tone flat and dead. "People who work too hard often have terrible, tragic accidents. It would break Mother's heart if something happened to you." He was trying to manipulate me, to wrap his threat in fake brotherly concern, but as I looked into his eyes, I did not see a brother. I saw pure, unadulterated panic masking a lethal intent. The predator was cornered, and I realized too late that I had just painted a target on my own back. Exactly 3 days passed since our standoff in the library. The tension between us was a suffocating fog, but the family machine demanded absolute obedience. Tonight was the grand celebration on the Long Island Sound. My parents had commissioned our 3-story super yacht for a massive floating gala to butter up the tech executives before the final merger signatures. The boat was a floating fortress of excess, overflowing with caterers, a live string quartet clashing with a famous club DJ, and hundreds of guests dripping in diamonds and deceit. I was explicitly ordered to be there. Eleanor, my mother, had her manicured nails dug so deeply into my forearm during the red carpet arrivals that I was certain she would draw blood. She hissed into my ear to smile, to play the role of the devoted, happy sister. For 2 grueling hours, I stood under the blinding flash of society photographers, serving as a silent prop in their $2 billion stage play. The music was deafening, the smell of roasted duck and expensive perfume churning my stomach. Unable to breathe, I slipped away from the suffocating crowd and climbed up to the secluded 3rd deck. The aft balcony was plunged in relative darkness, completely shielded from the flashing lights and pounding bass of the main party below. The freezing ocean wind whipped across my face, offering a brief moment of sanity. Then, the heavy teak door swung open. Julian stepped out into the shadows. Every instinct in my analytical brain screamed at me to run, but he raised his hands in a gesture of surrender. He carried 2 crystal champagne flutes. His shoulders were slumped, his usually perfect hair slightly disheveled. He looked entirely defeated. "You win, Sadie," he sighed, handing me a glass. His voice was cracked, heavy with what sounded like genuine exhaustion. "I cannot keep running. The syndicate called again today. They want more. I am suffocating. I am going to Father's office first thing tomorrow morning and confessing everything, all of it." He looked me dead in the eyes, executing a masterclass in vulnerability. "Just one drink," he pleaded softly, "to the end of this nightmare, and to say I am sorry." I hesitated, but the exhaustion in his voice mirrored my own. I took the glass. I took one small sip. The champagne tasted strangely metallic, heavily masked by the aggressive citrus notes of the vintage. It took exactly 4 minutes for my world to collapse. It started as a subtle tingling at the base of my neck, trickling down my spine like ice water. When I tried to place my glass on the railing, my fingers simply refused to uncurl. The crystal shattered on the wooden deck. I looked down, confused, but my vision suddenly tore into a violently spinning blur. My knees buckled. I slumped heavily against the steel railing, my breathing turning into shallow, ragged gasps. My mind instantly diagnosed the terrifying reality. This was not alcohol. It was a synthetic, high-dose surgical muscle relaxant. My nervous system was being forcefully unplugged. Panic exploded in my chest, but my limbs felt like they were filled with wet cement. With agonizing effort, I forced my hand into my evening clutch, my numb fingers blindly fumbling for my phone. I managed to pull it out, desperately trying to swipe the screen to dial emergency services. My thumb hovered, completely paralyzed, inches from the glass. A shadow fell over me. Julian stepped forward, his defeated posture vanishing instantly. He reached down and effortlessly plucked the phone from my useless, trembling hand. I looked up at him. I could not speak. My vocal cords were frozen, leaving me choking on silent screams. Julian looked down at me, and his lips curled into a smile so profoundly cold it made the ocean wind feel like a furnace. "You really should have stuck to your databases, little sister," he whispered, tossing my phone casually over the edge into the black water below. He stepped into my personal space, wrapping his strong hands firmly around my shoulders. He did not hesitate. With one brutal, calculated shove, he launched me backward over the waist-high railing. Gravity violently ripped me from the deck. I plummeted through the freezing darkness, my body a useless, heavy stone. The side of the yacht rushed up to meet me. I slammed shoulder first into the solid fiberglass hull. The sickening crack of shattering ribs echoed in my skull, a blinding shockwave of pure agony tearing through my chest. The impact threw me off balance, snapping my spine violently before I hit the churning, pitch-black water of the Sound. The cold was absolute. It felt like a million needles driving into my skin all at once. I sank rapidly into the crushing darkness. I was fully conscious, trapped inside a paralyzed meat suit, experiencing every single second of my own murder. The roar of the yacht's massive twin propellers thundered in my ears, vibrating through the water like an earthquake. They were churning just yards away, a mechanical meat grinder ready to pull me in. I tried to kick. I tried to thrash. Nothing moved. My lungs burned with a horrifying, desperate fire, crying out for oxygen, but my diaphragm was paralyzed. I was going to drown, or I was going to be shredded to pieces. But the ocean had a different algorithm. The massive displacement of water from the yacht's hull created a sudden, violent weight current. Instead of sucking me into the churning blades, a heavy surge of water blasted my limp body outward, tumbling me violently into the open sea. Salt water flooded my throat. The darkness closed in completely, swallowing the agonizing pain in my chest. The last thing I registered before my consciousness snapped was the frantic, sweeping beam of a Coast Guard spotlight cutting through the water above me. When the chaos finally dragged me back to the shores of the living, I was surrounded by screaming sirens and the blinding lights of the marina docks. I drifted in and out of consciousness on a rigid backboard, a tube shoved violently down my throat to force air into my paralyzed lungs. Through the dizzying haze of emergency lights, I saw him, Julian. He was entirely drenched, his tuxedo ruined, performing the absolute role of his lifetime for the harbor police. "She drank way too much," he screamed, his voice cracking with expertly manufactured hysteria, tears streaming down his face. "I told her to get down. She climbed up on the railing to take a picture. I tried to grab her arm. I swear to God I had her arm. But she slipped. Please tell me my sister is alive." I lay strapped to that stretcher, unable to blink. unable to scream, listening to my own brother orchestrate my tragic accident while the flashing red and blue lights painted his lying face. Consciousness did not return all at once. It dragged me up through a suffocating mire of agony and the sterile, metallic stench of hospital bleach. My chest was a cage of broken glass, every shallow breath a violent reminder of the titanium screws holding my shattered ribs together. When my eyes finally focused, I found myself staring at the vaulted ceiling of a luxury recovery suite. The walls were painted a calming, muted beige, but the heavy mahogany door was shut tight. Two men in immaculate black suits stood completely still by the entrance, their arms crossed. I recognized them immediately. They were elite private security contractors my father used for high-risk corporate travel. My throat felt like dry sandpaper, shredded by the breathing tube that had recently been removed. I turned my head, an agonizing inch at a time, looking for a nurse. Instead, my father stepped out of the shadows. Arthur Spencer looked immaculate, adjusting the cuffs of his bespoke suit as he approached the edge of my bed. I tried to speak, forcing a pathetic, rattling wheeze from my raw throat. "Julian," I gasped, the single word feeling like razor blades. "He pushed me." My father did not flinch. His expression remained completely devoid of warmth, resembling a man evaluating a bad investment portfolio. "You will stop speaking immediately," he ordered. His voice kept to a terrifyingly quiet, controlled register. "Your clumsy, drunken stunt on that boat caused our stock to drop 4% by the opening bell this morning. The media is swarming the lobby downstairs. The tech merger signs in exactly 1 week. Sadie, you will not ruin your brother's future, and you will certainly not sabotage this family's legacy with your hysterical delusions." He knew. Looking into his cold, calculating eyes, a horrifying realization crushed whatever oxygen I had left in my lungs. He might not know about the money or the hit and run, but he knew Julian was responsible for my fall, and he simply did not care. A $2 billion merger was worth far more than his daughter's life. I was not being protected in this hospital suite. I was being quarantined. My mother took over the day shift of my imprisonment. Eleanor played the role of the distraught, devoted matriarch perfectly whenever the medical staff entered the room. She would dab at her dry eyes with a silk handkerchief, asking the nurses redundant questions about my pain levels. But the second the heavy door clicked shut, her mask vanished. Without a word, she systematically emptied the drawers of my bedside table. She confiscated my smartwatch, my backup phone, and my encrypted work laptop, dropping them into her designer tote bag. "Doctor's orders," she informed the head nurse later that afternoon. "Absolute zero screen time. We need her brain to rest, and absolutely no outside visitors. Our family needs privacy during this tragic time." I was entirely cut off from the world, trapped in a high thread count prison, unable to move without searing pain, and completely at the mercy of the people actively covering up my attempted murder. The true depths of my nightmare arrived on day 3. My parents had to leave the hospital for an emergency board meeting. 30 minutes after their departure, the mahogany door glided open, and Julian slipped inside. The security guards outside did not even flinch. He pulled up a chair and sat painfully close to my face, the scent of his expensive bergamot cologne making my stomach heave. He reached out, gently smoothing a strand of hair away from my sweaty forehead. The contrast between his gentle touch and the murderous intent in his eyes made my blood run entirely cold. "You look terrible, sister," he whispered, a cruel smirk playing on his lips. "But you are still here, and since you haven't backed down, I had to make a few contingency plans. If you even think about whispering a single word to the police about who really orchestrated this massive fraud." I press a button on my phone. Instantly, an airtight trail of forged documents will be sent to the authorities, proving that you were the one who embezzled the $45 million. The narrative is already written. Sadie, the quiet, disgruntled data analyst, stole the money, realized she was about to be caught, and fled the country under an assumed name in a desperate attempt to escape justice. He patted my cheek, stood up, and casually walked out of the room, leaving me drowning in absolute, paralyzing despair. The trap was perfect. If I spoke, I would be locked in a federal penitentiary for financial crimes. If I stayed silent, I would be a prisoner to my family forever. My breaking point was imminent until the following morning when Dr. Eris Thorne walked into my room for my daily physical evaluation. Dr. Thorne was not a typical private hospital physician catering to the whims of the ultra-rich. His posture was rigid, his eyes constantly scanning the room with the ingrained vigilance of a former military combat medic. He asked the two security guards to step back, citing strict sterile protocols for examining my surgical incisions. As he leaned over my bed, his calloused hands gently prodding my ribs, he paused. He rolled up the sleeves of my hospital gown, his gaze locking onto the dark, violent purple bruising around my upper arms and wrists. The hospital charts blamed those marks on my impact with the water, but Dr. Thorne traced the distinct, oval-shaped thumb indentations on my skin. He looked directly into my eyes. The silence between us stretched for 3 agonizing seconds. He knew. Anyone who had seen actual combat knew the difference between a blunt force impact and the violent, crushing grip of a human hand. These were textbook defensive wounds. He did not say a word to the guards. Instead, he smoothly pulled a tourniquet from his pocket and tied it around my bicep. Standard post-operative infection check. Dr. Thorne announced loudly for the suits by the door, pulling 2 empty vials from his coat. He slid the needle into my vein. As the dark red liquid filled the second glass tube, he leaned in under the pretense of checking my pupil dilation. His lips barely moved as he whispered directly into my ear. "The Spencer family owns the board of this hospital, and they control the primary labs downstairs," he breathed, his voice barely a vibration in the air. "But I still have my security clearance at an independent military toxicology lab across the state line. I am sending this blood there myself tonight." He slipped the vials into his inner pocket, gave me a curt, reassuring nod, and walked out. For the first time in 96 hours, a tiny, brilliant crack of light pierced through the suffocating darkness of my prison. 72 hours after Dr. Thorne smuggled my blood out of the hospital. He returned during the graveyard shift. The ward was silent, save for the rhythmic beeping of my heart monitor. He bypassed the sleeping security contractors outside my door, stepping into the dim light of my room with practiced stealth. He did not speak. Instead, he slid a folded piece of paper and a cheap plastic disposable cell phone under my pillow. Before he left, he gave me a single, affirming nod. As soon as the door clicked shut, I pulled the paper out with trembling fingers. It was the toxicology report from the military lab. The results were glaringly definitive. My blood was completely free of alcohol. Instead, it tested positive for a massive concentration of a synthetic veterinary tranquilizer, a black market chemical compound strictly regulated and typically used to sedate large livestock before surgery. My brother's carefully constructed lie about a drunken accident was medically and scientifically annihilated. I was not clumsy. I was poisoned. The victim inside me died in that exact moment, replaced by a cold, highly calibrated analytical machine. I waited until 3 o'clock in the morning, listening to the heavy breathing of the guards through the wood door. Before I turned on the burner phone, I dialed the only person on Earth I trusted implicitly. Maya was my lead systems architect at Aethera Biogenics. She possessed a brilliant, borderline terrifying intellect, treating digital firewalls the way normal people treated flimsy screen doors. She answered on the second ring. "I need you to listen to me very carefully, and I need you not to ask any questions until I am finished," I whispered into the receiver, keeping my voice barely above a breath. I gave her the concise, unvarnished truth. I told her about the embezzled millions, the extortion syndicate, the poisoned champagne, and the freezing water. For 10 seconds, there was absolute silence on the line. Then, I heard the sharp, aggressive clacking of her mechanical keyboard. "What do you need me to do?" Maya asked, her voice dropping into a register of pure, icy focus. Julian and my father undoubtedly had the yacht's main security servers wiped the moment I went overboard, I explained. But you know maritime networking. There is always a redundancy. The engineering subnetwork, Maya confirmed immediately, her keystrokes accelerating. Maintenance crews use a separate, hardwired camera system to monitor the deck integrity and mechanical stress points. Rich people never remember to wipe the blue-collar servers. Give me 24 hours. She needed less than 12. By the following afternoon, Maya sent an encrypted video file to my burner phone. The footage was grainy, shot from a low-angle maintenance lens mounted near the aft scuppers. But it was undeniable. It clearly showed Julian handing me the glass. My sudden physical collapse, him snatching my phone, and the deliberate, violent shove that sent me plummeting into the dark water. I watched my own murder attempt replay on a loop, feeling nothing but a profound, calculating calm. The puzzle was almost complete. The final, unexpected piece arrived later that evening in the form of a meticulously dressed visitor. The guards opened the door and stepped aside respectfully. Elise, Julian's fiancée, walked into the room carrying a massive bouquet of white lilies. As the heir to a prominent real estate dynasty, she was the perfect aesthetic match for my brother. But as soon as the heavy door sealed us in, the poised socialite facade crumbled. Elise dropped the flowers onto the floor, her hands shaking violently. She locked the deadbolt, walked over to my bed, and reached into her designer handbag. She pulled out a small, empty glass vial with a torn medical label and placed it onto my tray table. I found it shoved deep inside the breast pocket of the tuxedo jacket he wore on the boat, Elise whispered, her voice cracking with barely contained horror. I have known something was fundamentally wrong with him for months. The late-night phone calls, the sudden outbursts of rage, the missing money from our joint accounts. When I heard you fell, I knew it was not an accident. I just needed to know how he did it. I looked at the vial. The chemical name on the torn label perfectly matched the veterinary tranquilizer on my toxicology report. I looked up at Elise, seeing the devastation in her eyes. She was supposed to marry this monster in less than 6 months. He is being extorted for a fatal hit-and-run he committed 7 years ago, I told her plainly, sparing no details. He stole from my family's fund to pay the blackmail, and he threw me off that boat to keep me quiet. Elise closed her eyes, a single tear escaping, before her expression hardened into something incredibly dangerous. I am not marrying a murderer, she stated coldly. What do we do? We cannot go to the police, I replied, my mind working through the tactical variables at lightning speed. My father effectively owns the local precinct. He has judges on speed dial and the best defense attorneys in the country on retainer. If we hand this evidence over to a detective, the vial will miraculously disappear from the evidence locker, the video file will be corrupted, and I will be transferred to a psychiatric facility before midnight for my own protection. I paused, letting the reality of our situation settle in the room. We cannot just expose him, I continued, my voice steady and resolute. We have to completely obliterate the infrastructure that enables him. We have to tear down the entire Spencer empire from the inside out. Right there, in the sterile confines of my hospital prison, an invisible triad was forged. Over the next 48 hours, operating through burner phones and encrypted channels, Maya, Elise, and I built an ironclad web of destruction. Maya mapped every single offshore transaction, connecting Julian's routing numbers directly to the known accounts of the criminal syndicate. Elise acted as our physical operative inside the Spencer estate, photographing Julian's private ledgers and quietly documenting my parents' frantic cover-up meetings. Meanwhile, I collated the data, merging the financial crimes, the extortion records, the toxicology report, and the yacht footage into one massive, undeniable digital payload. We were no longer just gathering evidence. We were manufacturing a bomb, and I knew exactly when and where I was going to detonate it. To trap a predator, you must first convince them that they have already won. My survival depended entirely on my ability to become the perfectly broken, compliant daughter my parents always wanted. The morning after my secret meeting with Elise, I asked the nurses to summon Arthur and Eleanor to my room. When my parents walked in, flanked by their usual grim-faced security, I did not look at them with defiance. I forced my hands to tremble. I let a few carefully manufactured tears spill down my bruised cheeks. "I remember," I whispered, keeping my voice fragile and entirely devoid of strength. "I remember the boat. I had 3 glasses of champagne before I even went up to the deck. I was dizzy. Julian tried to grab my wrist when I leaned back, but I was too heavy. It was an accident. I am so sorry for causing this mess." The physical relief that washed over my parents was genuinely repulsive. Arthur actually let out a long, heavy exhale, while Eleanor stepped forward and patted my uninjured hand. They believed the lie instantly, because it was the exact narrative they desperately needed to be true. I had surrendered, and the threat to their empire was neutralized. Within 24 hours, the suffocating grip on my life loosened, with my obedience secured. The family no longer needed to treat me like a high-risk prisoner. I was quietly transferred from the high-security private hospital to an elite, secluded rehabilitation center nestled deep in the Hudson Valley. The heavy security detail was drastically reduced to a single guard stationed at the end of the hallway, mostly to keep the press away. My parents gave me a new smartphone, completely confident that I was too terrified and broken to cause any more trouble. They gave me back my connection to the outside world, and that was their fatal mistake. From my quiet, sunlit room at the rehabilitation center, I coordinated our silent war. Maya had been working flawlessly in the shadows. Using the combined data Elise and I had provided, she constructed a digital weapon of mass destruction. It was a dead man's switch, a highly encrypted automated protocol loaded onto heavily fortified offshore servers. The payload contained everything my official toxicology report, the suppressed maintenance video of Julian shoving me, the cross-referenced ledgers of his embezzlement, and the police files from the fatal hit-and-run 7 years ago. "The timer is locked," Maya confirmed over our secure channel late one night. "The automated release is synchronized perfectly. On Friday morning at exactly 10 o'clock, the exact minute the merger press conference goes live, this entire package will be blasted simultaneously to the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the Securities and Exchange Commission, and the top editors of every major financial news outlet on the East Coast." The trap was set. Now, we just needed to force the beast into the cage. Julian thought he was safe, but we knew his psychology. He was arrogant, but he was also a coward living on borrowed time. We needed him to panic, to make a desperate, unforgivable mistake right before the finish line. Elise played her part with terrifying brilliance. While staying at the Spencer estate, she waited until Julian was deep into a glass of scotch in his study. She walked in, her face pale, holding his unlocked private tablet. "Julian," Elise said, her voice shaking with perfectly acted dread. "A message just popped up on your encrypted messaging app. I did not mean to look, but I saw it. Someone is demanding $50 million. They said they know about the $2 billion tech merger on Friday. They said if you do not pay them double by Thursday night, they are going to the police about the car crash." According to Elise, Julian dropped his glass. It shattered on the hardwood floor. He snatched the tablet from her hands, his face completely drained of color. He did not even question how the extortionists found out about the merger. His paranoia completely overrode his logic. He was trapped in a burning room, and we had just blocked his only exit. The pressure completely broke his mind. He could not access the family trust without my father noticing, and he could not stall the blackmailers. Driven by pure, unadulterated panic, Julian made the ultimate error. At 2 o'clock in the morning on Thursday, just 24 hours before the merger, he used his executive credentials to bypass the internal security protocols at Spencer Apex Capital. He initiated a massive, unauthorized wire transfer of $50 million directly from the firm's central holding accounts into a blacklisted offshore shell company. He thought he was saving his life. In reality, moving that amount of corporate money during a federally mandated quiet period left an undeniable radioactive footprint on the international banking grid. Maya intercepted the digital receipt instantly. The financial crime was now absolute, documented, and completely irreversible. With the explosive charge fully primed, I needed to ensure I was in the room when it detonated. I called my mother on Thursday afternoon. I kept my tone soft, apologetic, and eager to please. I told her that staying hidden in the rehabilitation center made it look like the family was fractured. I suggested that I should attend the signing ceremony. I will be in a wheelchair, and I might look a bit bruised, I told her over the phone. But if the tech executives see me there, supporting Julian, it proves our family is united. It proves the rumors of a rift are false. It is the perfect optical victory for the firm. Eleanor took the bait with shocking enthusiasm. To her, public relations and optics were the only things that truly mattered. The image of the brave, recovering sister sitting quietly beside her brilliant brother was a narrative too delicious for her to pass up. That is a very mature decision. Sadie, she purred into the phone, I will have a car sent for you first thing Friday morning. I hung up the phone and looked out the window at the setting sun. The board was set. The pieces were locked in place. I was going to roll right into the heart of their golden empire, and I was going to burn it to the ground. Friday morning arrived with the crisp, cold clarity of an execution day. The grand boardroom on the 50th floor of Spencer Apex Capital headquarters was packed to maximum capacity. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a sweeping view of the Manhattan skyline, but all eyes were focused on the massive mahogany table at the center of the room. Dozens of financial journalists had their cameras poised. The board of directors sat in quiet reverence. My mother, Eleanor, stood near the front, radiating triumph in a tailored designer suit. I was positioned exactly where she wanted me, parked in a sleek wheelchair just to the side of the main podium. Playing the role of the brave, healing sister, Julian stood at the center of it all. He looked like the absolute pinnacle of success. His hair perfectly swept back, his smile brilliant and disarming. Beside him stood the chief executive officer of the tech giant, looking eager to finalize the $2 billion merger. At exactly 1 minute to 10 o'clock, my father, Arthur, stepped up to the microphone. He delivered a sickeningly sweet speech about family resilience, innovation, and the bright future of the firm. He gestured to me, praising my strength after my tragic accident, before handing a heavy gold-plated fountain pen to my brother. Julian took the pen. He looked down at the towering stack of contracts. He looked up at the flashing cameras. He leaned forward to sign his name and secure his empire. He never touched the paper. Under the blanket draped over my lap, my thumb hovered over the single, red application icon Maya had installed on my phone. The application was linked directly to the wireless receiver she had spliced into the boardroom's audiovisual matrix the night before. I pressed the screen. Instantly, the booming corporate background music cut off, replaced by a deafening blast of static. Every single high-definition presentation screen surrounding the boardroom flickered black. Julian paused, an annoyed smile on his face, waiting for the technical glitch to pass. But the screens did not return to the corporate logo. Instead, the grainy, low-angle maintenance video from the yacht illuminated the room. It played in brutal clarity. The entire room watched Julian hand me the glass. They watched me collapse against the railing. And then, a collective, horrified gasp echoed through the room as the golden boy of Spencer Apex Capital violently shoved his own sister into the freezing black water. Before anyone could even process the attempted murder, the screens shifted. A massive, high-resolution scan of my military toxicology report flashed, highlighting the massive dose of veterinary tranquilizer in my blood. Beside it, the banking ledgers appeared. Every single journalist with a camera began snapping photos frantically as the screens displayed Julian's panicked, unauthorized wire transfer of $50 million, executed at 2 o'clock in the morning just 1 day prior, moving corporate funds into a blacklisted syndicate account. Julian dropped the gold pen. It clattered against the mahogany table, his face drained of all color, transforming into a mask of pure, unadulterated terror. He looked at me, his eyes wide with the realization that he was totally destroyed. Chaos erupted. Reporters shouted over each other. The tech executive backed away from the table as if it were on fire. My father lunged toward the audiovisual controls, his face purple with rage. "Cut the power!" Arthur screamed at the security guards. "Turn those screens off right now." "Leave it on," I commanded, my voice slicing through the pandemonium with a cold, terrifying authority. The room froze, turning to look at the woman in the wheelchair. "Julian embezzled your money to pay off a fatal hit-and-run from 7 years ago," I announced clearly, addressing the entire board of directors. "And he poisoned me to keep the secret. But if you think my brother was smart enough to orchestrate this entire cover-up alone, you are gravely underestimating the rot at the core of this family." I tapped the screen on my phone one last time. The video evidence vanished, and a stark audio waveform appeared on the screens. It was a secret recording Elise had captured by placing a micro transceiver under the desk in my father's home office over a week before the yacht party. My father's voice boomed through the state-of-the-art surround sound speakers, chilling the entire room to the bone. "She found the missing funds. Julian," the recording of Arthur Spencer hissed, perfectly clear and undeniably damning. "Your sister is a liability. If she takes those ledgers to the authorities, this $2 billion merger is completely dead. I will not let you or her destroy my life's work. Deal with Sadie quietly, whatever it takes to ensure she does not speak. I will handle the police and the hospital cleanup." The silence that followed was absolute. It was the heavy, suffocating silence of total destruction. Arthur Spencer, the revered titan of Wall Street, stood frozen, his jaw completely slack. He had ordered my execution to protect his stock price. He was the mastermind. The chief executive officer of the tech partner did not say a single word. He simply reached across the table, grabbed the multi-billion-dollar contract, and violently ripped it in half. He dropped the shredded paper onto the floor and walked straight out of the room. At that exact moment, the heavy double doors at the back of the boardroom burst open. Federal Bureau of Investigation agents, flanked by armed officers from the Securities and Exchange Commission, flooded the room. Maya's automated dead man switch had delivered the exact same evidence files to their headquarters at 10 o'clock sharp. They sealed every single exit. "Arthur Spencer, Julian Spencer, you are under arrest," the lead agent barked, flashing his badge as he marched straight toward the table. Julian completely broke. The immaculate golden boy fell to his knees, burying his face in his hands and screaming hysterically, a pathetic, sobbing mess on the floor. Arthur tried to maintain his aristocratic dignity, attempting to adjust his tie, but 2 agents grabbed him by the shoulders, slammed him roughly against the wood paneling, and locked heavy steel handcuffs around his wrists. Eleanor shrieked, clawing at the officers until she too was forced against the wall and cuffed for obstruction and accessory to attempted murder. In less than 5 minutes, the invincible Spencer empire simply evaporated into thin air. I sat in my wheelchair, watching the architects of my misery being paraded out in chains. My mother looked at me, her eyes begging for an ounce of the mercy she had never shown me. I gave her nothing. My expression remained entirely blank. I gripped the wheels of my chair and slowly turned around. The flashing strobes of 50 cameras illuminated the hallway, but I did not look back. I rolled out of the boardroom, leaving the ruins of my family behind me. The fallout was spectacular. The criminal trials dragged on for months, dominating the national news cycle. Julian and Arthur were denied bail and eventually sentenced to decades in federal prison without the possibility of parole. Eleanor received a substantial sentence for her role in the financial cover-up and my imprisonment. I filed a massive civil lawsuit against the firm and the estate. With the sheer mountain of evidence I possessed, the settlement was astronomical. A few months later, Maya and I stood in the sunlit lobby of our brand-new, cutting-edge cybersecurity firm, entirely funded by the ashes of my parents' wealth. Elise had left the city, starting a quiet, peaceful new life on the West Coast, free from the toxic gravity of my brother. I never visited them in prison. I never read their letters. Some people believe that forgiveness is necessary for healing. I completely disagree. I did not need to forgive the monsters who tried to drown me in the dark. I just needed to drag them into the blinding light, watch them burn, and use the wreckage to build my absolute freedom. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. We hope you enjoyed it. As an ad-free channel, your support is what keeps us alive. Please support Maya Revenge Stories with just $1 via the QR code on the screen, or click the link in the description box or pinned comment. Also, we'd love to connect with you. Please leave a comment telling us which city or state you're listening from. Thank you for standing with us, and see you in the next stories.